Hello everyone, it's Linnea, bringing you guys another video from the RMTV. I'm your host, RubidiumMoon, and today we are going to talk about more Percy Jackson. I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of videos on a regular basis regarding Percy Jackson in anticipation for the new Disney Plus series. So if you haven't already, I did a reading. I read the Altered Destinies by Annabeth 14. So check it out on the card. And definitely go watch that when this video is done. Now, pivoting from that, from fanfiction, we're going to talk about some characters that I love. Today, we're going to talk about the best character in the Percy Jackson series, period. And that is Annabeth Chase. Annabeth Chase is absolutely probably one of my most favorite characters in a book, in fiction, in my opinion. She's one of my favorites. Like, she has been consistently one of my favorite book characters and consistently just the best. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about why I love Annabeth so much. So let's do a kind of a recap of who Annabeth is. Annabeth has a lot of things going for her. But for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with Annabeth, we're going to kind of talk about it. So she is a Greek demigod. She is a daughter of Athena. She's the architect of Olympus. So when Olympus gets destroyed, she is the one who is responsible for helping rebuild Olympus. In fact, she designs New Olympus completely on her own, basically. I mean, she's like the head architect. I mean, it's not completely on her own. She does have, like the gods helping her. But basically, she designs the new Olympus, and that's part of her reward for being one of the heroes to help defeat Kronos in the last Olympian. In the last Olympian. She's also, as of the last Olympian, she is also the girlfriend of Percy Jackson, our protagonist. She's also one of the Prophecy of Seven, so she's one of the seven big heroes in the prophecy that is mentioned in the prophecy. She has a brilliant and huge role in Heroes of Olympus that I'll get to in a moment. And then she obviously has like blonde hair and gray eyes, which are important traits, by the way, and I'll talk about why in a second. And then she is the only character that I know of, the only character in fiction that has my birthday. Which probably, I mean, if there is any character that I related to the most, it's Annabeth, and I'll explain why in a moment as well. And then her fatal flaw is hubris. And if you don't know what hubris is, or I guess it's hubris, it's basically just pride. Like, she is very prideful. She really wants the best for her, and sometimes it can get in the way. She doesn't like to be wrong, and she doesn't like to be kind of argued. And this is a common fatal flaw within the children of Athena. They're very prideful because they have a great amount of knowledge. They have a great amount of wisdom, and so they are very prideful in that sense. And then on top of that, she also has a absolutely terrible childhood. and she is kind of abused by her stepmother. I mean, she talks about it a lot within the books with Perseus, with also in Heroes of Olympus. She kind of touches on it, but it's mostly within her kind of opening up to Percy about her childhood. You know, she went through a lot. She was kicked out of her house at the age of 7. And then on top of all of that, she loses her best friend when she was 7. And we'll definitely get into that as well. So that's kind of the overall synopsis, I guess, of Annabeth. She's definitely gone through a lot. And part of Annabeth's character is she's very much a protagonist in her own right. She's not a sidekick. She is just another protagonist. And she goes through a lot within the realm of Percy Jackson. There's actually several things that she goes through. She loses a lot of people, and I think it's not necessarily really addressed within the fandom or the books of how much Annabeth actually goes through. For example, she is kicked out as a child. She's a child when she's kicked out. She's the youngest camper to ever be in Camp Half-Blood. And on that same day, she also loses her best friend at the time, which is Thalia. Thalia is transformed into a pinecone tree, and from what Annabeth knows, Thalia is dead. And then on top of that, the only people that she has left during that is Luke Castellan and Grover Underwood. Those are the only 2 people that she started as friends with and had left by the time she arrived in Camp Half-Blood. Now, I'm sure those of you who have read the books or are familiar with the story, that you know that Luke Castellan, at a point, changes sides. Not just any side, he goes to Kronos, and in fact, he helps Kronos kind of come back, and he at some point in the battle of the labyrinth, he's just completely lost. He is taken over by Kronos, and we see bits and pieces of Annabeth's tragedy, in that she doesn't die, but she goes through something that is arguably worse than death. She loses just so much, back to back to back. She has her young age trauma. At age 12, she loses, 12, 13, she loses another dear friend to her, basically, when Luke betrays them all, betrays Percy. She loses that, and she also is in this kind of denial where she wants to save Luke. Right? She wants to be the hero that saves Luke, but ultimately he is lost until the very last second, and even then he still has to die, even if he was redeemed in the end, even if he had that heroic moment, he still dies. And so Annabeth loses so many things, and then just a few months later after that, after losing her best friend, or best childhood friend I should say, she then loses her boyfriend, the love of her life. Percy goes missing, and she doesn't know what to think. She doesn't know if he's alive. She thinks he's alive, but she doesn't know that. And on top of that, It doesn't help that Percy's memory is basically wiped, although the one thing is that he does remember Annabeth. But I also remember in The Mark of Athena. The Mark of Athena is a beautiful book if you love Annabeth. Same with House of Hades, but Mark of Athena is truly Annabeth's book. It talks a lot about her character. It gives us a lot of information that we didn't necessarily know to begin with. For example, there's that point in Mark of Athena where Annabeth talks about how she wishes she had dark hair. She wishes she had like brown hair, basically, because as a blonde, she is not taken seriously, and I imagine as a blonde woman, she is taken even less seriously. So there is this envy that she wants to be a brunette. And she talks about this, and it's a short moment, but it's an important moment because it gives us even more knowledge of her character. That she is someone who went through this prejudice because of something that she genuinely couldn't control. You know, sure, she could have like used hair dye, but that's not the same thing, and she would still be, you know, a natural blonde. And it's not something that is truly looked at sometimes. There's a lot of prejudice in general in society, and we don't think about the small things that kind of happen. And knowing that Annabeth came to Camp Half-Blood as a child also adds to that, because she is also one of the youngest children of Athena. Even though she's been there the longest, she's also one of the youngest in the camp, at least at the time. In the time that she grew up, she was the child. She was, you know, so not only is she blonde, because she, you know, the dumb blonde is stereotype, but there's also the idea that she's just a kid. And in one sense, Chiron kind of treats Annabeth like a kid because she arrived as a kid. I mean, they all arrived as kids, but she arrived as a literal child. You know, she didn't have, there was just so much growth that needed to be happened. And when you go through your childhood around these same people, you know, you're going to be seen a certain way. And even though people respect Annabeth, it feels like Annabeth doesn't think she does, almost she doesn't recognize the respect that she gets because she's gone through so much, because she keeps failing. And she does fail a lot. You would think that with all her wisdom, Annabeth would be this Mary Sue who just knows everything. And the thing is, she doesn't. And that's what's so interesting, is that oftentimes there are moments where Annabeth is wrong. And the moments that she's wrong are very important, because even when she is wrong, she still holds on to the idea that she is right because she is too prideful to admit that she is wrong. And that is so relatable to many people. And so, in a sense, Annabeth is a tragic hero because she has lost so much. Not in the sense that she dies, but, I mean, she does go to hell. She does go to hell, so in a sense, you know, in that sense, but even without dying, she has lost so much. She and Nico, but we're not talking about Nico right now, we're talking about Annabeth right now. And so, I love Annabeth because she, with all her knowledge, with everything she knows, she is still flawed. I mean, you can talk about like Percy and how he is like learning the world, but Annabeth is in the world that she is in. She knows so much. She has so much knowledge. She has so much talent, and yet it isn't enough. And that is beautiful because we look at like kind of the geniuses of the world. We look at someone like Albert Einstein. We look at like Steve Jobs, or even Bill Gates, or even different scientists, and we think that they are people that have this vast amount of knowledge, that know everything, and the truth is they don't. They don't know everything. They know what they are good at. They know a lot of things, but they don't know everything. And that is something that is highlighted so well through the books, that the children of Athena, as smart as they are, as wise as they are, they do not know everything, and they're not always right. And in fact, many times Annabeth is wrong. She is wrong. And it's not because she's stupid, it's not because it's just because she doesn't necessarily see what Percy sees all the time. And she sees Percy as kind of a moron, because, I mean, he is kind of a knucklehead. I mean, he's a seaweed brain. But on one hand, she has what she believes is right. And the other side, where she uses those facts and logic. She uses facts and logic to decide a lot of things. And the thing is, facts and logic is not always right. I mean, they can be true, but they're not always right. And using that logic, especially in the world of gods, the world of mythical creatures and gods, you can't necessarily apply facts and logic, and yet Annabeth still tries to do that, and it doesn't always work. And a lot of people, when they see Annabeth, they compare her to Hermione. And they're very similar in some senses, but they're also very different in other senses. For example, Hermione is smart because she delves into all of the books, and she applies she gains her knowledge because she is so alien to the world. Annabeth's knowledge comes from just growing up in the world. She is very much, I would argue that Annabeth is closer to being Ron Weasley than she is Hermione. And you would say, well, Ron is kind of a moron. Well, in the books, the Harry Potter books, Ron knows a lot about the wizarding world because he grew up there. And that is kind of the same with Annabeth, where Annabeth knows a lot about the Greek world because she grew up there. But at the same time, Annabeth grew up in a bubble, a literal bubble, where she couldn't leave, she couldn't see what the world is actually like. And so she grew up in this bubble, thinking the world was one way. And no, she's not a moron. She is a victim of her environment. Because there's knowledge that she was, I mean, she does have her cell phone. But it's kind of interesting to think about how Annabeth, with all her knowledge, doesn't really know everything. I mean, she even judges a lot of like the Aphrodite children because of their makeup. You know, she talks about that a little bit. And it's like, I remember in Battle of the Labyrinth where she's going on what she thinks is a date. She's going to, she wants to go on the date with Percy. She's going to go on the movie date. And she, like, dresses up for the first time. She's like, well, what do I wear? And so it's almost like Annabeth doesn't really know how to be a girl because she grew up in this bubble where she was expected to be the greatest. She was expected to be the best. And she needed to be kind of tough. She can relate to Clarice in that way. Where Clarice, well, we'll talk about Clarice more, but in a sense, Clarice and Annabeth are very interesting, and a very interesting duo, because they hate each other, but they're very similar. And it's just that Clarice clings to brute strength, and Annabeth clings to the books and the knowledge in her brain. And it's even funnier that it's Clarice who calls Annabeth Wise Girl, which Percy ends up calling Annabeth the entire, like, that's his pet name for Annabeth, is that she's the wise girl. She's Wise Girl. And it's so fascinating. And so, kind of going into that, Annabeth is very relatable. She is so relatable. To me, anyways. She has ADHD. I have ADHD. I'm not dyslexic, so we don't get there. But I kind of share her hubris a little bit. Not the full extent. I mean, I know that I have a lot of pride, and I'm willing to admit that. I mean, who doesn't, right? But there is this sense of I need to be in control. I need to do everything because if I don't, who will? That kind of mentality. And in a sense, Annabeth, because she is sculpted by her mother, she is basically adopted into this family, with Frederick and the she monster, the stepmother, and her brothers as well. And then, and so I can kind of relate to that a little bit because I am adopted and I also have brothers. Okay, that's not the relatable part though. The relatable part is that Annabeth is she's very real. Like, there are moments that are kind of funny, but also in a way sad about Annabeth. Like, they're like the small little moments, like when she's doing cabin inspections, right? She does the cabin inspections in The Last Olympian, I think it is. She does or is it Battle in the Labyrinth? One of those. She does the cabin inspections, and she goes to her own cabin, and her bed is a mess. Oh, no, it has to be The Last Olympian because she has her laptop out. And so she's kind of like this messy thinker as well. And which is relatable to me because, I mean, but Annabeth, I suppose you could argue that Annabeth is kind of the tsundere. A little bit. Because she's like cold at first. Like when we first meet Annabeth, she's kind of cold. I mean, she's nice, but she's kind of also, she has her walls up. She eventually opens up, but she kind of acts tough. She acts tough and smart. And she hides the fact that she has a teddy bear. So there are like little things where she has that, you can see that pride, and it's not always so in your face. In fact, most of the time it's not really in your face. And when we get to the Heroes of Olympus, when Annabeth is kind of on her own a lot, she loses her boyfriend, she's lost multiple of her friends, she is tested a lot with her kind of faith in her mother, in Athena, and she's reminded of her tragedies. And I think because of that, Annabeth is just so real. In fact, I feel like Annabeth, of all of them, could be someone in real life. Like, maybe not the entire character, but the idea of kind of being too smart for her own good, and with that having the pride and the hubris, whatever you want to call it, and talk about a horrible childhood she goes through. I mean, her stepmother basically abuses her. I mean, not, from what I know, she doesn't get physically abused, but she kind of gets verbally abused. She's shunned. She gets kicked out at a young age. She kind of has to put up with a lot with her stepmother, similar to how Percy has to put up with her stepfather, his stepfather. So, excuse me. And also she's also the one with the kind of the obsession with Cinnamon Toast Crunch as well, I think. There is just, oh my god, there's just so much to relate to with Annabeth. I can't believe how much I have in common with Annabeth as well. we're pretty much the same age. I mean, I was born in 2000. She was born, and I think she was born in 99. I think she was born in 99. Actually, let me just check. '93. I guess she was born in '93. But still, she was born July 12th. I was born July 12th. We have a lot of we have a lot in common. Like I suppose if I have a fatal flaw, I suppose it probably would be hubris too, a little bit. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I kind of like am in between of Percy and Annabeth. like I have bits of Percy, I have bits of Annabeth, I think. But anyways, so the final thing is that it's the fact that Annabeth is so prideful. She's so prideful. She's so full of hubris. But it's kind of because Annabeth is prideful that she is such a good character. Because it shows within the book. And it doesn't lose its kind of touch where Annabeth has to be right. Annabeth refuses to be wrong. And in that sense, she kind of almost does it to herself. There's a lot of moments that are just so good. I wouldn't be able to name them all. But I do think that Percy and Annabeth were like made for each other. And I think that Annabeth, like, Percy is smart in the sense that, well, I think Percy is smarter than people give him credit. I mean, he did save the world, basically. I mean, sure, he had some help along the way, but at the end of the day, he had to make very tough decisions that would not have happened if it was somebody else. Like, he had to decide to give Luke the dagger. He had to decide to make peace well, I guess he didn't necessarily decide that, but he made peace with the Romans. And what's funny is that even though Percy's memory was erased, he still remembered Annabeth. And you kind of wonder, well, why is that exactly? I mean, what exactly compelled him to remember Annabeth? I mean, Hera certainly didn't intend for him to remember anything. And you can say maybe it was kind of true love. But I think the simple answer is that he remembered Annabeth because Annabeth was there from the beginning, and they just bonded with each other. And I think there's kind of this unspoken love as much as there is the spoken love. There's a lot of things that aren't necessarily touched on that are also true. And there's just, I mean, I can go off all day, but so that we're not spending so much time talking about this, I think the best thing about Annabeth is that, I mean, I think I've actually already said it. I mean, Annabeth is just, there were just moments in the books that wouldn't have happened without Annabeth. And I'm not saying that Percy would have been completely lost without Annabeth, because that's not true. And we know that's not true because he was alone for a lot of the time. But Annabeth is our anchor into the Greek world, if you think about it. Because Annabeth grew up in the Greek world, and she knows a lot in the Greek world. And she, honestly, of anyone, she lost so much more than any of the others. And while Percy gains a lot of friends and loses a lot too, and so does Nico, Annabeth is the one who grew up with these campers, who is basically their family. Like, everybody treats Annabeth like the little sister or the older sister, or everybody treats Annabeth as the one, almost. Like, she is the anchor of the camp. Like, without Annabeth, the camp's kind of screwed. I mean, if you think about it, right, Annabeth knew basically all of the campers. She knew the Stoll brothers, she knew she knew the Aphrodite children, she knew everybody. Percy didn't necessarily know everybody. In fact, it took a long time for him to know everybody, which is fair. I mean, there's a lot of demigods on camp. But Annabeth knew everybody, which means that she lost more. And I think because she knows everybody, we have this unique light into kind of what it was like to grow up as a demigod, as someone who was in the camp the entire time. There's just a lot to unpack. And it certainly isn't going to be done in this video. But I just want to make clear that Annabeth is like the best character in the books. And that's all. That's it. I think I've said my piece. If you like this, leave a like. If you comment down below, who's your favorite character? What do you love about Annabeth? And also, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Let me know that you want to see more. This is only the first video, basically. I plan to do a lot, just to give you an idea of what I plan to do. I plan to do a video on Percy, of course. Also on Grover, Nico. Like, I kind of plan to go through all of the major characters and talk about these different things. I also plan to kind of talk about those big moments in the series, like the big moments, and kind of giving my thoughts on what happened in that situation, and kind of discussing a lot about different things like, was Luke a hero in the end? Was Selena a hero in the end? Kind of talking about just different aspects of the books. I really want to delve into the books in general on this channel, especially since we're witnessing the rise of Percy Jackson. People are going to be introduced to Percy Jackson with the Disney Plus series. It'll be interesting to see where this all goes. It'll be interesting. But yeah, again, that's all I have to say, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.